Okay, everyone. I know there's going to be still people joining, but in the essence of time, I do want to get started. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kelly Elliott. I'm the Interim Executive Director and Marketing Communications Specialist at AORS. Thank you for joining us today, and we are really pleased to see such a strong interest in this webinar. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, and we will share the link with you later, either today or tomorrow once it's uploaded. We also encourage you to use the chat and the question and answer features throughout the webinar. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time. I'll be monitoring the chat through the presentation as we go, and we'll address as many questions as possible during the question and answer portion at the end of the webinar. Today's webinar focuses on excess soil management, an issue that continues to be top of mind for municipalities across Ontario. With evolving regulations, increased scrutiny, and real cost and liability implications, this is an area where having clear, practical guidance is more important than ever. We want to thank the Phil app for sponsoring this webinar, and we will be hearing from the co-founder, Bryan Kerr, later in the webinar on how the Phil app can help you manage your excess soil at no charge to you. We're very fortunate today to be joined by Reema from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, who brings extensive experience working with municipalities on excess soil planning, compliance, and project delivery. And we're grateful to them for sharing their time and expertise with us today. The session is designed to be practical and informative. So again, please don't hesitate to drop your questions into the chat as they come to mind. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Reema to get us started. And Reema, I'm just going to share the screen for you.
Thanks, Kelly, and thank you everybody for joining today and inviting us to participate in this session. So my name is Reema Kureishy. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks in the Land Use Policy section, working mainly on the excess soil policy. And I'm also joined by Lompart, Manager of the Land Use Policy section. So I'll take you through the presentation first, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So Kelly, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up here for you. There you go. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So the presentation, I'll go over key requirements that are under the excess soil regulation. I'll also go over some of the recent regulatory amendments that were made to the regulation, so everybody is aware of what those are. And then I'll provide a few helpful resources, materials at the end that may be relevant for the attendees today. Next slide, please. The excess soil regulation deals with soil that is excavated at project areas and that cannot be reused on site. It could include soil from construction activities such as buildings, infrastructure, stormwater pond sediment. So it applies to excess soil from all those variety of projects. The regulation itself, OREG 4619, the On-Site and Excess Soil Management Regulation, was finalized under the Environmental Protection Act in December 2019. The regulation provides clear rules for the management of excess soil. It recognizes excess soil as a resource, and its reuse is encouraged both within the project area or if going to a different reuse site, going there for a beneficial purpose. If it's not beneficially being reused, it's considered waste, and this is really a fundamental part of how the regulation is set up. So to help achieve this goal of increasing beneficial reuse of excess soil and for having clear rules for proper management of the excess soil, the regulation includes requirements and exemptions that apply to various different sites and stages of the excess soil management process. So one key area is the project area, which is the site where the excess soil is originally generated from. It has rules for reuse sites, which are sites at which excess soil is being beneficially reused for a purpose. It has some rules around interim sites where soil might be taken for temporary storage or processing. There's rules around the hauling of excess soil, the transportation of excess soil. And finally, there's also some rules to keep in mind around the landfilling of this material as well. Next slide, please. So to go through all of these sort of one by one, where excess soil is being reused within the project area, it's not considered excess soil in that regard, and its reuse is not restricted in that case either. So it's not subject to the excess soil reuse quality standards that would apply if it's being taken off-site to a different site for reuse. So really, reuse within a project area is encouraged for projects where that's able to happen. Next, if excess soil is being taken to a reuse site, again, that's when it is considered to be excess soil. It's being taken off-site from the area it was originally excavated from. In this case, there are some criteria that apply for the reuse of this material at this separate site, which would essentially allow it to not be treated as waste and be seen more as a resource. And these criteria include A, that the reuse site owner or operator must have consented in writing to the deposit of the soil at that site, so it's not just being deposited there without their knowledge. Second, the excess soil must be needed there for a beneficial use, so it's not just being stockpiled at a site, there is a use for which the soil is being taken to the site for. And if there is no use for it, there must be a site-specific instrument at that site that allows for that deposit of the soil. Third, the quality and the quantity of excess soil must align with the beneficial use at that site. And finally, if the excess soil is liquid soil, its deposit again must be permitted by a legal instrument. So these are the key sort of fundamental requirements to keep in mind when you're considering taking soil to a different site for reuse. And again, it's just around the reuse site owner having knowledge, having accepted that soil, and making sure some key criteria around the quality, the quantity, and the purpose that soil is being taken there for are being met. So when it comes to the appropriate quality of excess soil, that can be determined using various methods. First of all, the excess soil regulation itself includes generic excess soil reuse standards as tables, and these are provided in a document called the Rules for Soil Management and Excess Soil Quality Standards document. So there's tables of standards that the regulation provides, which are generic standards. Next, there could also be site-specific standards that could be developed by a qualified person, and this is typically a professional engineer or geoscientist, who can look at a site, at a reuse site, and assess what specific standards that may vary from the generic standards that the regulation has that could be more applicable for that site. And third, standards for the quality of incoming excess soil could be specified in an applicable legal instrument. And this could include, for example, a municipal bylaw or permit, which could set out standards that could be more or less stringent than what is in the regulation. Next slide. So the next few slides talk about excess soil reuse planning requirements. Now, these are requirements that, again, apply to a project leader, so the person who is excavating soil at the source site. And some projects are required to complete these requirements, but they don't apply to all projects. So what we talk about when we say excess soil reuse planning requirements, these include registration of a notice on an excess soil registry, which is an online registry, retaining a qualified person to complete some assessments of past uses, and if necessary, a sampling and analysis plan and a soil characterization report. Completion of an excess soil destination assessment report must also be done by a qualified person, and there must also be the implementation of a tracking system to track each load of soil from the source site to any interim or final destination site that it's going to. So this is important because I know there's also been some questions that participants in this discussion also may have had around when sampling is required for certain sites. So it's important to sort of just, again, stress that these requirements apply to some projects. And where they do apply is three key circumstances, which are listed here. So they will apply to project areas that have a past or present use as an enhanced investigation project area. And what that includes are things like industrial uses, gas stations, dry cleaners. So sites that may have a higher chance of contamination being present there. So those types of project areas would be triggered to complete these requirements. Second, project areas that are being remediated by removing excess soil from that site in order to reduce the concentration of contamination at the site, including for the purpose of filing a record of site condition or an RSC. These project areas would also be triggered into these requirements. And so the first two of these situations relate more to the quality of the soil that might be at these sites. And there could be a higher chance of contamination for sites that are, for example, past industrial uses or sites that are being remediated. The third trigger is more quantitative. So for larger projects, which are projects that are excavating 2,000 cubic meters or more, and roughly that's around 200 truckloads of soil, within a settlement area, these sites may also be triggered to complete these requirements if they're within a settlement area. And that is defined as an area that's designated in an official plan for urban uses, so towns, villages, cities, those types of areas. However, there is a carve-out if the project is on what we colloquially refer to as a low-risk property, or properties that are used for residential, parkland, institutional, or agricultural uses. In these types of sites, if there is 2,000 cubic meters or more being excavated, the trigger wouldn't apply. But generally, these are this is for larger sites from commercial uses, community uses, those types of sites. If a project is on such a site and it's excavating that amount of soil, these requirements would be triggered. So again, just wanted to emphasize that there are three key circumstances that would trigger projects. Not all projects have to do these additional requirements of filing a notice, of retaining a QP to complete assessments. Next slide. Now, I mentioned there were triggers that would make these projects have to complete those reuse planning requirements. The regulation also accounts for situations where there are exemptions from these requirements, even if you're triggered because you were in an industrial area, the project was in an industrial area, or you were excavating 2,000 cubic meters or more. There are still some scenarios that are considered to be lower risk, or where reuse would be encouraged in similar projects, or where the control of the excess soil isn't shifting too much. In those situations, there are, again, a variety of exemptions provided in the regulation, and these are listed here. They're also provided under Schedule 2 of the regulation. And I'll highlight a few that are relevant to infrastructure projects specifically. So if there are projects that are about maintaining infrastructure in a fit state of repair, and I'll get into what that includes in a later slide. But for these types of projects that are just doing routine maintenance for infrastructure projects, those would be exempt from the reuse planning requirements of filing a notice in the registry, of retaining a QP to complete certain reports. If the excess soil is from an infrastructure project site and it's being reused in another infrastructure project with the same project leader managing both projects, or if it's a public body managing the reuse site, in that case, again, there's an exemption from needing to do all of these requirements. Or if there's an immediate danger to human health, for example, cleanup of a spill, which could also be the case for some infrastructure projects, that again provides an exemption from needing to complete these requirements. So there, again, these are listed in Schedule 2 of the regulation. And again, just to clarify, this is not an exemption from all the regulatory requirements in the regulation. This is an exemption from those additional reuse planning requirements that I mentioned in the previous slide. So other requirements under the regulation would continue to apply, even if you're exempt from needing to file a notice or needing to complete additional assessments. Next slide, please. So that covers the project area requirements largely. Now, again, going back to the reuse site, I'd mentioned earlier that there were certain key criteria that had to be kept in mind when taking soil to a reuse site, like ensuring there is consent from the reuse site owner, that it meets the appropriate soil quality. So those are the reuse criteria that apply to all reuse sites if excess soil is to not be designated a waste when at that site. Additionally, for larger reuse sites, and again, larger we sort of define as sites that are accepting 10,000 cubic meters or more of excess soil for a specific undertaking, like rehabilitation of a site, for example, or grading or backfilling. If these larger sites are accepting that amount of soil, they must also file a notice on the excess soil registry as a reuse site. And they also have to complete some procedures relating to the incoming soil to ensure that the soil being received is appropriate. The only exemption here is if the undertaking is related to, again, an infrastructure project. So if you're taking more than that amount for an infrastructure project, you don't have to complete these requirements for filing a notice on the registry or the additional procedures, but otherwise these requirements would apply to larger reuse sites. Next, we have some requirements for interim storage and processing sites. So it may be the case that once soil is excavated from a project area, it needs to be stored for a short amount of time before it can be taken for reuse or disposal elsewhere, or it needs to be processed to become reusable again. And the regulation provides for certain types of sites that could be set up without needing a waste approval from the ministry, but that are subject to rules instead in the regulation. So if the site is being operated by the project leader for managing soil from their own projects, there are two types of sites that could be considered for use. One is called a Class 2 soil management site. These are intended to store dry soil from a project leader's project in advance of a known reuse site being able to accept that excess soil. So again, this could allow for some short-term storage, some short-term processing of the excess soil before it goes for reuse from that project leader's projects. There could also be local waste transfer facilities that could be set up and would be used for short-term, again, bulking, storage of soil from field operations and then managed from there onwards. So those are the two types of sites that a project leader could set up. So for example, a municipality, if they're, if you're doing multiple projects and you need a site to be storing material from all those projects, these are some options for municipalities to set up these sites. Then there's also some third-party sites which don't need to be owned and operated by the project leader for the projects. They could accept soil from different types of projects and still be exempt from a waste approval, but subject to rules in the regulation. So one of these sites is a residential development soil depot. These are intended to manage soil from residential projects that may need some gut and fill balancing, and there's some requirements for the quality of the soil that might be acceptable. So it must meet residential quality standards if these sites are being set up to manage soil. These sites are also required to file a notice on the excess soil registry and provide a copy to the local municipality before the operations start. We also have landscaping soil depots that could be set up. These are sites intended to manage topsoil or to produce gardening or landscaping products. And so that, again, is a limited purpose for these sites. And accordingly, they have requirements around the soil quality they can accept, how much soil they can accept, and what it is to be used for. And again, these sites are required to provide notice to the district office of the ministry and a copy to the local municipality. And finally, we have something called aggregate reuse depots, which are a new type of site that was introduced as part of the recent amendments to the regulation, which again, I'll talk about in a second. But these types of reuse depots are intended to manage aggregate material and to produce an aggregate material as well that would be reused again for the purpose that it was engineered for. And similar to other depots, they are required to provide notice to the ministry and to the local municipality before they set up these operations. So again, for all these sites, I mentioned there are rules to be followed. There are some limited types of low-risk processing methods that could be allowed, like mixing of soil, size-based sorting in some cases, which would be allowed without a waste ECA from the ministry. And again, they do have limitations such as the maximum quantity that could be allowed to be stored at these sites or how long material could be stored at these sites before it has to be moved off-site. So again, these are a variety of options for temporary management of soil, but there are rules that must be followed in order for these sites to be set up. Okay, next slide. So there's rules for hauling, so the transportation of excess soil. So anybody who is transporting excess soil, they are required to have a hauling record to help confirm where the soil originated from, where it's going, and who to contact for further questions. And this is, again, a requirement for almost all movements of excess soil. There are some minor exemptions for very small projects, so 5 cubic meters or less as being transported from a project site, that might be exempt, but generally hauling records are required for almost all movements of excess soil. And it is a responsibility for the owner or operator of the site where the soil is loaded for transport to ensure that this record is created and to ensure that the appropriate information is provided in the record. There are some storage rules for various sites where soil is being stored. So this could be at the project area itself. It could be at those interim sites that I mentioned. It could be at the reuse site as well. So there are some key requirements that the regulation has, unless there is a site-specific instrument that provides different requirements for storage of excess soil. These requirements apply to all sites, and they are intended to ensure that the adverse impacts are being prevented from the storage of soil, and include requirements such as setbacks from water bodies and erosion control requirements. Again, like I mentioned, municipalities, for example, if they have a bylaw or a permit, they could vary from the requirements in the regulation through instruments like that. And finally, for landfills, as of January 1st, 2027, next year, there will be a restriction on the deposit of clean soil. So not all excess soil, but soil meeting certain cleaner quality standards, table 2.1 for residential purposes. Soil meeting that quality standard would be prohibited from being taken to landfill sites. There are some exceptions to this prohibition. For example, the landfill needs the soil for daily or final cover or any other ancillary uses at the site, soil meeting table 2.1 could still be taken there for that purpose. Or the qualified person may provide declaration stating that there's no other site that the soil could be used at because of, for example, it contains some contaminants that there is no standards for, and the only appropriate place to take it is to a landfill. So again, this is a requirement that isn't in effect yet. It does only apply to excess soil of a certain cleaner quality, and there are still exceptions from this prohibition.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, there were a series of regulatory amendments that were recently made, and by recently I mean October 2025 last year, that were made to the regulation to increase soil management and reuse flexibility, to provide some clarity for rules that could help reduce costs for soil management projects. And specifically, there were rules that allow now for greater reuse, especially with infrastructure projects. So these amendments are in effect now. And if you wanted to find more information about these, you can visit the Environmental Registry of Ontario. Notice number 019-9196 that's listed there, and that includes an overview of the full set of amendments. And quickly here, I'll describe them as well. So one of the things that I went over previously were aggregate reuse depots. These are a new type of waste management site that could be set up to manage reusable aggregate material as long as it is, again, going to be reused as aggregate, and it has certain rules that must be followed. And if those rules are followed, it would be exempt from a based ECA. There were some changes made to allow for greater reuse of aggregate and stormwater management pond sediment, which contain common contaminants related to asphalt. So there is now some rules that allow for this material to be reused again in similar areas, so near asphalt roads, under asphalt roads, which would allow it to be reused instead of being landfilled. And as well, if there's aggregate with naturally occurring exceedances, which may be the case for various bedrock material that might have naturally occurring metals in it that's being used in often as aggregate, that also there are some rules now allowing for flexibility of reuse of this material in similar types of infrastructure projects. There's also greater reuse allowed in between infrastructure projects of a similar type. So for example, road to road, or some projects that are taking place for maintaining water main or sewers under a road, there's ability to reuse soil between similar types of projects where it's the same project owner or where the reuse site is a public body. There's also been some more flexibility in removing the reuse planning requirements for soil move between infrastructure projects and reuse sites that may have different owners, where a notice in the registry would still be required, but some of the other requirements like completing assessments and tracking system, those are now exempt for reuse between infrastructure projects. There's some sampling flexibility allowed now for stormwater management pond sediment. Previously, there was stockpile sampling that was only allowed under the regulation. Now, in situ sampling is also allowed for stormwater sediment projects. And there's some flexibility for sampling frequency in general for parameters that are not contaminants of potential concern at a site. So that's, again, a very quick summary of the amendments made. And again, I would encourage you to visit the Environment Registry of Ontario for more information on all of these. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've gone over all of the key requirements that provide sort of a structure of what the regulation includes in terms of requirements for the various types of sites. For the next few slides, I'll go into a little bit of detail around matters that might be of relevance to the folks in attendance here. As well, I think there were some questions that came up about some of these topics that we were provided with that would have been helpful to include for this audience. So that's what I'll go over for the next few slides. The first thing that I'll go over is, what do we mean by maintaining infrastructure in a fit state of repair? So I'd mentioned this earlier as being an exemption from needing to complete the reuse planning requirements. And again, that was the filing of a notice in the registry, written in QP to complete some assessments, having a tracking system in place. This exemption provides flexibility for infrastructure projects that may be doing some routine maintenance to keep that infrastructure in a fit state of repair. So this includes repairing infrastructure, replacing existing infrastructure with similar infrastructure. It would not result in increased capacity or different alignment, so that would be considered new infrastructure, but maintenance includes things like culvert replacement, roadbed repair, pipe replacement. Things like that would come under this exemption from the planning requirements. Also, if there's temporary infrastructure that is part of the maintenance or replacement process that will eventually be removed, such as a bypass pipe or a minor road diversion, that could be considered part of the maintenance as well. But what's not covered under this exemption or under the idea of fit state of repair is anything that's new construction. So if there's a new road being constructed, a new transit right-of-way, a new tunnel for a subway, a new water main or sewage tunnel, adding any capacity, widening of a road, realigning in any way, those are not considered maintenance. There may be some minor increase in capacity or realignment that may be needed just to meet current operating standards. That may be acceptable, but in general, new infrastructure, new construction does not come under this exemption. So this is just a relevant point to mention for particularly for folks who are working in road construction. Next slide, please. So there was also, I believe, a question around or an interest in finding out a bit more around municipal site alteration bylaws and what those could include in terms of soil management requirements. So as I mentioned before, the regulation recognizes using site-specific instruments in a variety of situations, and something like a municipal bylaw or permit could give a municipality authority in deciding how reuse sites can be managed, what type of soil they might accept, and how that soil would be used. So municipalities should proactively undertake due diligence to determine what type of site-specific instruments may be used to manage soil for an undertaking and what types of requirements they could address, which could include things like the location, the depth, the quality, or the quantity of excess soil that's appropriate for a proposed beneficial use site. Typically, this could include referring to for quality specifically, a specific table of standards that would be referenced in the instrument. For the quantity, the instrument could also provide what amount of soil is appropriate to be deposited at that site for a particular undertaking. And it could also provide additional information like where it's to be placed and the fill elevation that is to be achieved as part of the beneficial purpose for excess soil at that site. Where these site-specific instruments are silent on some of these requirements, then the rules in the regulation would apply, including for the quality that would apply, and any other rules around placement, storage, etc., for soil management at that site. And again, municipalities are responsible for enforcing the instruments that they have put into place for management of soil, including through the laws and permits that would regulate this. And there's also a tool by the Canadian Urban Institute called the bylaw tool. A link to that is provided at the end of the deck if that is useful. It is a helpful reference. It provides some best practices, some examples of bylaws, and some requirements that are key that could be considered to be included in these bylaws relating to excess soil management. It was developed a few years ago, and the regulation has changed since then. So there may not be reference to every single regulatory requirement that is currently applicable under the regulation, but it is still, I think, a helpful tool that municipalities could refer to understand better how to set up bylaws relating to excess soil management. All right, next slide, please. So I'll go over a few specific flexibilities that the regulation has around excess soil reuse that would be relevant for infrastructure projects. Now, recall I had mentioned in the beginning that excess soil, unless it's beneficially reused, is waste, and soil quality is a key criteria for considering when excess soil is waste or not. But the regulation does have recognition of common contaminants that may be found in infrastructure soil coming from infrastructure projects, and allowing for like-to-like reuse where it is, being able to be used safely while still having some rules in place to ensure there's no adverse impacts from this reuse of soil. So I'll go over a few key examples that may be relevant. So one, there's a few different ways to reuse soil with common road-related contaminants, and specifically this is salt, asphalt, or naturally elevated parameters that might exist in aggregate. So soil with exceedances of specific parameters relating to these can still be reused and deemed to comply with the standard without being considered waste, but there are some rules, again, that would apply. So for example, if there's salt-impacted soil, that refers to soil with exceedances of certain parameters that are exceeding because of the application of substances like road salt for vehicle or pedestrian safety. So in this case, salt-impacted soil could still be reused in other areas where there is expectation that the same substances will be used again. So for example, roads, sidewalks, parking lots. It could also be reused in a variety of industrial or commercial use properties, or there might be some depth requirements where excess soil must be finally placed in order to be reused without being considered waste. And particularly this becomes important if there's vegetation being grown at certain sites. So specifically for rural areas, agricultural lands that are used for growing crops or for pasturing, there is a requirement that excess soil that is salt impacted must be placed at a certain depth of 1.5 meters below the surface. And other restrictions also apply, such as setbacks from potable wells and water bodies. So again, flexibility in reusing this material, but also some key requirements to keep in mind to ensure there is no impacts from the reuse of this material. Similarly, for asphalt impacted excess soil, this is soil that may have exceedances of certain parameters, and these parameters are specified as petroleum hydrocarbons F3 and F4, and any polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons or PAHs. So where these parameters are exceeding the standards solely due to asphalt, there are some rules now in the regulation, and this was again introduced as part of the recent amendments in October, to be able to reuse this material. So again, the standards for these specific parameters may be deemed to be met if it is confirmed that the excess soil is not impacted by any other contamination, and that it is reused within projects where similar impacts would also be found. So for example, under another asphalt road or parking lots. Again, there are restrictions to where it cannot be used. For example, in asphalt paths in parkland, agricultural, or other sensitive use areas, there are some restrictions around its use there. But otherwise, there's a bit more flexibility for asphalt impacted soil to be reused. Next slide, please. And finally, under this umbrella of common contaminants, there are often naturally elevated parameters found in excess soil and recycled aggregate material. So for example, excavated material from a road base. They may have exceedances that are known to be occurring due to natural elevations of certain contaminants, for example, metals that are naturally occurring in these materials. And now there are some flexibilities that allow this material to be reused if it's being reused within an infrastructure project. And again, there's certain requirements that come hand in hand with this flexibility. So for example, a QP must be able to confirm that the exceedances for those specified parameters are known to be occurring naturally at the project area, and confirming that there's no other potentially contaminating activity that's impacting this material leading to those exceedances. So this is a very quick summary of all of these rules and restrictions that I just went over. For the full set of requirements that apply to these, I would encourage you to review the rules for excess soil management document, part 1, section D. So there's references to the sections provided here, but that's where the full set of requirements can be found. Next slide, please. All right, so the last 2 slides I went over common contaminants that are specific to road projects that could be reused more easily. These next 2 flexibilities in the regulation around reusing material, they're broader than the previous ones that I just went over, which was for specific types of contaminants. These are broader than those specific contaminants. So first, for reuse between project areas that may be separate, but they are part of the overall larger plant initiative. For example, if there's a road project being undertaken where there's excavations happening at different locations at the moment, but they would eventually be adjoined upon completion. In that situation, excess soil can be reused within those multiple separate project areas. It would almost be considered as being one project area, even though it is separated at that moment. And it would not be designated waste when it's being reused within those separated project areas that are all part of the same single larger planned initiative. Again, some criteria here apply, so ensuring that the excess soil is kept segregated from soil that's coming from any other project areas that are not part of that same overall larger project, and also ensuring that there's no signs of contamination in this excess soil that is being reused, unless it can be confirmed that the final placement wouldn't be causing an adverse effect. So there's a bit of flexibility provided there for projects that are being undertaken as part of a single larger planned initiative. Next, if there's reuse of excess soil between project areas and reuse sites that are both a similar type of infrastructure. So if it's being managed, for example, between road-to-road projects, and again, I mentioned this was provided as part of the recent amendments in October in the regulation. So where there's material that's being excavated from roads or from any infrastructure under roads, for example, like water mains, and is being reused in a similar type of project, and where the project leader is the same, or where the reuse site owner or operator is a public body, that excess soil, again, would not be designated a waste. So again, it does not need to meet those reuse quality criteria I'd gone over earlier when it is finally placed for reuse. And once again, criteria still apply that must be followed in order to take advantage of this flexibility. For example, ensuring that the soil is kept segregated from soil from any other project areas, unless they meet the criteria provided here. So again, this is in the regulation. For more information, you can refer to sections 5.4 and 5.5 of the regulation. All right, next slide. Okay, so I'll go over a few resources that, again, you'll receive as part of the deck. But there are just some considerations through this flowchart here for how to reuse soil when it's coming from infrastructure projects, and what are the key considerations you need to think about. So I've been through, a whole slew of requirements in the past few slides. This is really just intended to be a simpler summary of a bird's eye view of the pathways you can consider when you are excavating material from an infrastructure project. Does it need to meet the reuse criteria if it's being reused in similar types of projects? What are some of the considerations for the reuse planning requirements? Are there exemptions that might apply? What are the considerations if you are storing this material at an interim site? So this provides a really high-level overview of the considerations for infrastructure projects that you could refer to. And next slide, please. And this flowchart is a little bit more specific to aggregate material. So again, this might be material that could be excavated from road projects. How does it fit into the excess soil regulation? Because material could come under the definition of excess soil when it's being excavated from these kinds of projects. So again, this provides a very quick overview again of what the opportunities for reuse might be, what key rules might apply depending on where it's being taken to. Does it get treated as waste depending on where it's being reused, and whether it has any considerations for not losing that waste designation depending on certain criteria that may not be met. So again, this is just meant to be, again, a summary of some of the key requirements that I've gone over in the previous slides. Next slide, please. And in the next slide, there's just a list of a few resources that may be helpful to refer to. So we have a excess soil webpage, which includes some fact sheets that include plain language overviews of some of the key requirements under the regulation for project areas, for reuse sites, and for the transportation of soil. There's also that Canadian Urban Institute bylaw tool that I mentioned that's listed here that, again, feel free to refer to that if you're looking for a bit more guidance around how bylaws could be used to include requirements around excess soil management. And then there's a few other resources here that are industry-led that provide some best practices for the different aspects of excess soil management that may be useful as well. So that brings us to the end of my portion of the presentation. Kelly, I'll turn it back to you at this point. If there's anything that needed more clarification, I haven't really been looking at the chat, but I could go over anything that needed a bit more clarification. Perfect. Or we can get into questions.
Thanks, Reema. It was a lot of information, and as I said before, this is being recorded, and we'll share all the resources as well with you after the event, so that way you do have all of that information after this, so it's not you trying to remember everything. I'm going to turn it over to Bryan. As I said, we're going to have a Q&A after Bryan's portion of the presentation as well, so Reema will be able to answer some questions then. So Bryan, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Reema, for setting a lot of this stuff up. I think we have a lot of like visual solutions and sort of like, as a good sort of follow-up for everything that was just laid out. I think I've met a few of you already, but I'm Bryan. I'm one of the 3 co-founders of the Phil app. And if you have never heard of us, we are essentially like a end-to-end soil management platform for Ontario soil. We have like a marketplace where you can list your sites for free and capture all of this compliance data. So like you're capturing your compliance data as part of your site listings. You're getting matched with beneficial reuse sites nearby. And then we actually provide free tracking software as well. So you can really cradle to grave your soil for free in our product. So I will stop talking and I will share my screen. I'll go through a couple quick slides here. Let me share. And then I'll just jump like right into the app. Try and be as sort of visual as possible here. I know I'm a visual learner. myself. So, can you see my screen okay? Perfect.
Yep, you're good, Bryan.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So one of the hardest hitting slides in this entire presentation is probably the title slide, and I have two title slides for separate audiences. I realize that there's municipal audiences in this chat as well. But this is a really powerful statement that we've had from one of our best users. So Dufferin Construction is our number one user of our platform. They have more than 150 users at this point. Last year they had like 25 or so. And they've really gone all in. If anyone hears from Dufferin, thank you for being such a good user of our platform. But most of the soil and aggregate and asphalt material that Dufferin generates as part of its civil work ends up on our platform and gets matched and finds a much better home than sending it to waste. And this statement is just really broadly valuable, and we can kind of unpack this for the next few minutes. But every new project that the estimating team, that the site leaders start over at Dufferin, they open our app first, and we give them this like Google Maps kind of view of their project area. Who else is moving soil? Who needs it? What's happening in the market, right? I don't leave my house without opening Google Maps and checking traffic, checking reviews, you name it. That's my source of truth. We are people's source of truth for materials in Ontario and for track. And then from a municipal standpoint, we have a lot of municipalities on this platform. I had a great meeting with Innisfil this morning. We have a demo next week. I think we have 46 Ontario municipalities who are kicking the tires in the app, creating their own listings, various stages of adoption. But this really says it all. This is Vito from Newmarket. I don't know if he's on this call, but thank you for this amazing quote. But you can easily go from a paper-driven process or like a digital paper process, which a lot of places, a lot of places think they've gone digital, but they're still very paper oriented, to like a very clean process of advertising your material, getting matched, diverting your material from waste, finding a much better home for it, or you're receiving material from your local project area, and then digitally tracking it and having crispy, clean reports, versus a stack of pink carbon sheets with an invoice stapled to it that you need to go through and fix after the fact. So huge amount of time saving here, tons of value that we're providing here. Who am I? I'm Bryan. I'm one of the three co-founders. This is like a quick snapshot of our team. I am not coming from a construction background, although I've been in this space for like 5 years now for Phil. Myself and Matthew are coming from a pretty hardcore tech background. Our third co-founder, Michael, grew up in a construction company family, and he's our bridge to this space. But between Matthew and I, everyone on this call has an app on their phones that I designed or Matthew built. So I designed the Weather Network app, which has 40 million active users. I designed Zucasa's marketplace, apps for Adidas and for LG. Matthew built apps for the Home Depot, LCBO, Samsung. So we're coming from a pretty hardcore tech background, and that makes us different than a lot of other construction apps that are in this space. There are other tracking tools and things that are out there. Those are, industry people who created an app. We are Silicon Valley level tech guys who have been sort of brought into this space, and that's what's really made a difference for us. There has been other soil marketplaces that have tried to boot up in Ontario, and they've all failed. And only people with our sort of background are able to make this work, right? How do you build something like Uber and get drivers and passengers for day one? How do you like overcome this cold start problem? That's what we're very good at. So it's been going extremely well since we launched in 2022. We're getting close to 4,000 users in Ontario. Like I said, 46 municipalities, almost 200 engineering businesses. and we've moved a lot of soil, for sure. And as a big overwhelming problem is every project has the wrong amount of soil. This is a global issue. Every construction project has too much soil or not enough. um, it's getting treated as waste when it should not be. Then there's an enormous amount of money being left on the table for every single project in Ontario. It is the majority of projects. This is something that Reema brought up. One of the things that makes us unique is we are one of the only groups in Ontario who talk to everybody. Where we are every day talking to municipalities, to waste management companies, to contractors, project owners, everybody, and we have pristine data of what everybody is doing in Ontario. And this is real. So 80% of the soil that ends up going to waste in Ontario could be reused. This is a kind of inflammatory statement. And hopefully this is like an impactful one to take a note of. This is why Reema was saying, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Like, this is why this kind of soil is going to be banned from landfills next year, right? This is something that everyone in Ontario who moves soil needs to put on a sticky note on their monitor is you have 1 year until you can no longer send table 2 soil to waste. And this is like a serious game of chicken that the entire industry is playing. And it's not a soft limit. This is a hard limit as well. The landfills in Ontario will be full in 7 years. So even if, let's say, the amendment doesn't pass next year, and I can keep the party going, and we can keep sending totally reusable soil to waste, in 7 years, there is a hard limit of there's no more new landfills that we can fill up with this stuff. So this is like pretty serious. Most people are surprised to hear this. And like, this is a consistent stat that we hear when we talk to all of these class 1 facilities that are active users of our app. Almost 80% of the soil that they receive is totally reusable. And so why is this happening, right? Why is all of this great soil ending up buried with household waste in the ground? It's path of least resistance. It's just too easy to pick up a phone and send your soil to waste than it is to find a beneficial reuse site. So that's where we come in. We make it very easy to find beneficial reuse sites in your area. And this is also something, on the topic of we talk to, everybody in Ontario, most companies still think that they can contract away the liability. So when we talk to big project owners and they say, "Oh, well, we hire subcontractors, right? We have contractors that handle all of our excavation and disposal," and we say, "Yeah, we know why you contract it all away, because you still think that if illegal dumping happens, that you can wash your hands of it." That's not true, right? Most project owners are still surprised that they're on the hook if for the cradle to grave of their contaminated soil. This is not well understood in Ontario. So like what are we doing here? Like, just visually, what is the benefit, right? The best data that Ontario has is that the average haulage and disposal, like the supply chain radius for sites in Ontario, is 65 kilometers. So if you had a project here in Burlington, for example, your soil on average travels 65 kilometers to its final destination. You might be sending it to a transfer yard, but that soil is still moving that 65 kilometers to its final resting place. Same with, purchasing that soil. If you're buying it from a pit, this is where it's coming from, how far it's traveling. A triaxle truck of soil burns 400 liters of diesel fuel a day for that trip. So there's a horrific amount of diesel that's being burned for no reason to do that. Our users on our platform, their average haulage distance is only 28 kilometers. So when you create listings in an open marketplace and you get matched with each other, the hauls that result from that matching is 50% shorter than picking up the phone and ordering your material or sending it to waste. So how is that possible? I'm going to try to like unpack this stuff. There are so many really good companies that are using our app now that you can send someone like Oxford Properties your soil instead of sending it to a class one facility to a transfer to waste. So why would you pay between $1,000 and $1,500 per truckload to send your soil to waste that should not go to waste, that will be banned from going to waste next year? Why would you do that if you can send it to Oxford Properties for free or for very cheap for the cost of haulage? It doesn't make sense, right? So we have sort of got this great Venn diagram of compliance and cost savings that's come together for the first time ever, we think. And it makes a ton of financial sense to find reuse marketplaces and find reuse sites in your area. And people used to do that with brokers. They still do it with brokers. We are a much better alternative. We're just an open marketplace where you can just see all the sites and reach out to them. So that's, I'll jump into the app after the slide. That's what we are. We are this end-to-end solution for all of the issues facing Ontario's soil movers, regulatory costs, logistics. You can register your sites. We capture all the same information that you would capture on Ontario's official registry. Plus, we match you with other sites to try and get you that beneficial reuse matching. And we include the load tracking. Every load of truck and soil, every truckload of soil in Ontario must be tracked. I even tell the pool guys that it's like, just track it, right? It's not worth, saying, oh, I only have 10 loads of soil, so I don't have to track. Just track it. Doesn't cost anything. You have the peace of mind. Who knows what will happen with that soil in the future, right? So, and why would you want to use paper if you don't have to? So Ontario's only end-to-end soil tracking solution is a pretty healthy claim that we can make. That's what I'm showing you here. This is a live view of the app. You can visit it on your desktop at www.getfill.app, or you can go to the App Store and you can install it for free on your phone. And this is it. It looks like Google Maps. These are all, there's no like contact our sales team or do anything like that. You just get dropped right into the map and you can explore. These are all projects, sites, and material businesses who either need or have excess soil or stone or asphalt. We support 80-ish materials. There's a bunch of snow dumps that were created in the last couple weeks. So if you're moving snow, this is a great place to find snow dumps too. But yeah, anything that can move in a truck, we're tracking it. So this is all public here, and I'll show you the private view for tracking after that. But the app is divided into the marketplace and then the load tracking logistics portion. So as I zoom in here, you can see there's all kinds of colorful pins on this map. Sites that have blue arrows are sites that are bringing in soil here. So let's say I have a project area, near Keswick or, Markham or something, and I want to look for soil. Here is a site that was created by Condrain, which is one of the largest earth movers in Ontario. And they need 70,000 loads of soil in Keswick. This is so much soil. And they're eligible to receive up to Table 2 or 2.1. They are a verified company. They're, in good standing. And here I can make Condrain an offer on this soil to send that to them. If this was a site that's exporting material, they have their paperwork, their soil characterization reports. They can fill out as much or as little of their compliance information as they want. But this is another big Venn diagram solution that we're bringing to the problem of soil in Ontario. The more compliant your listing is, the more money you make. Your listing will be more successful in the marketplace if you get your soil tested. If you are looking to do tracking, if you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, your listing will be more successful in our open marketplace. So we have a incentives-based compliance formula here that is performing quite well. So companies who may not get their soil tested, who may kind of fly under the radar now, if you do everything right, if you're a little operator who, is not as a non-compliant, I don't follow the soil regs, operator in this area, if you do everything right, now you can do business with Condrain versus maybe you never have been able to do that before. So this is a real solve that we've got here. So that's a great example of a site that's taking material. Likewise, if you zoom out, you'll see there's sites, who are generating material, whether they're, permitted facilities or permanent facilities rather, or whatever. But you get the idea. You create your listing, they create theirs, and you get matched like Tinder. So you'll get an instant alert when someone else creates their site. Every morning at 7 a.m., you get another, you get a summary of all of your matches for your sites. It's very easy to create one. I can create one, pretend to create one right now. You just click add a listing. Let's say I want to create an export listing. I can zoom all the way into, let's just say I've got a listing on the Humber River here. Pretend I'm the TRCA, who's one of our great users now. And I could say, yep, here's my project area. I can type in the address, but I can also get creative here. There's no limit to how many pins I can drop on my project area. So I could say, here's my, exotic table 9 soil that's, waterfront adjacent. Here's my table 2 soil. Here's my table 2 with salt. Here's my table 3, whatever, asphalt impacted, PFAS impact, like whatever. You can create a little Shopify store here on your site and drop 10 different pins, all different timelines, all different types of material coming in, material going out, and you can just set up shop on your site here. So we have projects where they're knocking a building down, they're crushing that concrete on site, they're taking other people's concrete rubble and they're crushing it, they're reselling that into the local market in different grades. They're bringing in soil, they're bringing out soil. You get the idea. And you never know who needs what in every project area. And you'd be very surprised at some of the creative opportunities that get discovered here, like ski resorts. We had a ski resort out in Lindsay. Dagmar created a listing. They needed like 30,000 loads of table 2. They had everything permitted and legit, and they built a ski hill out of the soil, or they extended their ski hills up. And I went there, took my kids skiing, and they have this big sign right at the top. All this soil was, locally sourced. It would have been nice if they shouted us out, but we're still happy with that output. Anyways, so I can drop my pins here. I can also make my location private. We understand this was a request from TRCA, was that they could, not have, like, limit the chances of illegal dumping by scrambling the exact address of their sites. So anyone can do that now. So I can put my exact address, and then I can hide it in any direction I want by 4 kilometers. So you don't have to worry about people coming to illegally dump on your site. And then because this listing is created in Ontario, all of those fields like exemptions and past and future land use and all of the things Reema was talking about, it's automatically available to be entered here. So all you have to do is fill out this form, and you are starting your compliance journey here. And you can take it as far or as little as you want. Like I said, the more you add here, the better your site will perform in the marketplace. You have a big carrot at the end of the stick to fill this out as much as possible. So you can go in and, you or your QP can fill out, your land use, any site specific exemptions like were just brought up, like, okay, it's an emergency, or it's low risk residential, or it's a enhanced investigation property, or whatever, extra tags you want to put in there. You can pick your top level material. So let's say it's clean fill. Here's all of the contamination grades with or without salt that are in here. So let's just say it's table 2 with salt. I attach my soil characterization report, how many loads I have, who's paying for what. Am I expecting to receive this for free? Am I, willing to pay a certain amount, or, what have you? You fill it out. You can attach all kinds of other documentation here. And then if I press continue, my site is created, and then I immediately match. So very, very fast and easy to use. So if you have a project that's moving soil, just make a listing. It's really fast and free. And you can create up to 3 simultaneous listings for free. We do have a, usually by this part of the presentation, people are like, oh, how can this all be free? It's not 100% free. You can have 3 active projects for free. If you have 4 active projects, it's $129 a month for, which is pretty reasonable. So you can see on this map, our pin would have been created. There are also logo pins on the map. So you'll see companies like Miller and Amrise and, GFL and Malcon and, again and again, York One. These logo pins are paid. So if you own a material business, you can create a pin like this, like York One. You can get your company verified. And then it makes your business very easy to discover. But then also, we give you instant alerts on all new projects in your region. So if I create a clean fill listing or aggregate or whatever listing within 20 kilometers of this York One facility, they get an instant alert that says Bryan is moving 10,000 loads of soil 10 kilometers away from your facility. Maybe you're going to take the soil, maybe you're not. Maybe you sell stone or you sell aggregate or asphalt. And maybe this is an incredible lead for your sales team because every site that moves dirt will buy stone or asphalt. So that's how we're currently monetized is sites match with each other, and then material businesses get alerts to behavior and have an opportunity to pitch on that material. Cool. So that's the first half of the app is the marketplace, Tinder for dirt. Second half of the app is the load tracking portion. These are all real sites. So this is what it looks like when you have a active account, which has many simultaneous hauls that are all happening at once. So where is my one site sending their soil, where they're receiving it from? We map it all out just like it's, car navigation screen essentially. So I can zoom all the way in. I can click on a project here that's generating soil. It's sending it from one site to 2 receiving sites in this case. I can see that each of those sites has like a very simple to understand progress bar of how much soil is moved. I can click on one. I can go back in time. I can see soil that moved historically on this haul here. So I'll go back to the 16th last month. There was 103 loads that ran today, 20 trucks, 20 unique trucks, and then there's a leaderboard of time here, and then here are all of my bills of lading. So like Reema was saying, every haul has to have a bill of lading associated with that truck. This is just good practice. Even if you have a small little job, just track your soil. It makes so much sense to do because now you can do what I'm doing. You can go back in time. You can zoom in. Some people have photos of their trucks. You can see who was the driver, where did it go, how deep was it buried, who was the receiving site. I can pull a bill of lading. All that good stuff is there. And one of the coolest things I think is that you can share hauls. This is all for free. So your contractor, who's performing your work is doing the hauling and you don't really want to be that exposed to it, but you still want to keep your eye on it. You can just say, hey, go use this tracking tool called Phil, click on the share button and add me as a viewer. So you could say, okay, I'm Chad at Condrain, type in email address and then give me either editor access, tracking access, so I can send and receive trucks, or just view access. Great for QPs. Add your QP in here, give them view access. They can keep their eye on your the entire progress of your haul. Why not? And then it'll just builds up on the left here. So lots of cool stuff you can do. I'm going to stay out of the weeds on rejecting loads and all the other cool stuff you can do. But once you have a bunch of hauls that have been running for a day or weeks or a month, you can very easily pull all of this data in one click. You just press this download button, pick your time period. So I'll just say like for November, and then I can click on my site there. I can request a report, and then I just get an Excel file and an email that has everything in one spot. So this is what that report looks like. This is sanitized, obviously, but it's broken up into 4 tabs. And then I can see, okay, for this site, for this time period, here are all the hauls that were active. Here's, how much volume was approved and accepted or rejected or whatever. And then under the bills of lading, I can see here's every digital bill of lading in or out. This is what you need in order to take that crucial compliance step of tracking your loads. So yeah, who drove, who accepted the truck, who signed it out. We took all of the great stuff that Reema was showing before, and we just codified it. So the app is built to the letter of the law. There's no extra compliance in here. People don't want to be extra compliant. There's no GPS tracking hardware. There's no extra stuff. It is just as much as you need and nothing more. And then under the third tab is a nice value add. We show you, here's all of your haulage companies that performed that moved material on that site for that time period. How many trucks did they have sign in? How many loads did they move? How many hours in the job? This is a million times better than a stack of pink carbon sheets with an invoice stapled to it. Even if you only use this for rough accounting, it's still such a great step in the right direction. So that's the haulage portion of the app. And to create a haul is really, really easy. And this is why our app being free is so important, is it's very easy to send someone a haul invite who has never even heard of our app and get them hauling digitally. They don't have to contact me or my business partners. They don't have to set up a demo. All you have to do is get their email. So you can say, I want to create a new haul. I can use one of my marketplace listings as a starting point, or I can make a new one. I could say, okay, yeah, I'm sending material to another company, or I'm receiving it from one, or I'm sending it between 2 of my sites, or I'm moving soil from pile to pile on one site. And I can say, I can fill out the basic information for this haul, but all I really need is that other person's email. So if I want to send Kelly a haul invite, I just type in Kelly's email here, and she's never even heard of the Fill app. Doesn't matter. She's going to get an email that says, hey, Kelly, Bryan wants to haul 200 loads of clean fill with you. Press here to accept. And then that's it. Now she can create an account. She's signed in. She gets this exact view, and she can start sending or receiving trucks. So very, very simple. That's pretty much it. And again, just sort of to answer the question of how do we make money again and again, there's this little add-on store button that's here. Like I said, if you want to create 3 sites for free, you can do it. 3 simultaneous sites. You can get verified, get that blue check mark, protect your name, make sure no one can misrepresent who you are. Although like classic, Facebook marketplace kind of stuff you can do here. This is that product that I shared, the pro facility listing. So if you sell stone or asphalt or you receive soil, you should absolutely have one of these. Get that instant alert to all nearby sites. And we will literally tell you, who's viewing your sites. Did they call your sales team? How many views are you getting? All that great analytics stuff is all captured too. And you can run ads. So if you sell engineering services or, you name it, we have a ad platform on here. So you can create an ad very, very quickly and spend between $50 a month or $1,000 a month, whatever your budget allows. And it's just like Instagram. So that's how we make money. I think we have a very good alignment of interests in here. So yeah, and then there's all kinds of other upcoming features. You can join the wait list for them and get notified when they're coming. So like haulage and dispatch is coming. This is going to be a really big one, market value. So like we know the price of all the material in Ontario, and this is still a big question mark, right? This is the bookend to the title page from Duffer, and I showed you, which is how much does soil that's table 2 with salt cost right now delivered in Kitchener-Waterloo, right? You ask somebody that, and it's a guesswork. They have no idea. They might call around, especially a year from now. How much does it cost? No idea. We can tell you exactly how much any grade of soil costs in Ontario. So this is an enormous amount of intelligence that we can provide. So this is coming soon. So you're creating your tipping fee and saying, I want to be paid $100 to tip on my reuse site. We can say, well, actually, in this region right now, the average pricing is $122.50. So that adds up. If you're drain and you're receiving 70,000 loads of soil in the app. Cool. I think that's pretty much it. Again, if you want to see this for yourself, it's wide open. Just go visit the app at getfill.app or install it on your phone. And we release a new version of this app every 2 weeks. So if you see anything that needs improvement, or you have a cool idea for a feature, just email me or call me, and you'd be very surprised how quickly we can get it into the app. So thank you for your time. I think I don't know if I'm overtime or undertime. I just went for it. So
No, you're
thanks,
good, Brian.
everybody.
Thanks. Someone just has their hand raised, and they did it in your presentation. So I'm assuming it's for you there, Brian.
Okay, cool. This is from Lane. Can use this app for hauling from a quarry to a project to track loads. Yeah, for sure. So like I was saying, we anything that moves in a truck you can track. So companies are tracking asphalt, they're doing their stone sales in and out. Snow, like I said, anything that can be hauled, we treat them all fairly equally in the app. So that's one of the greatest things is, if you're that quarry and you want to move away from a paper process, but you don't want to spend a fortune, but ultimately you don't want to ask your customers to go sign up for an app, that's expensive either, or learn cumbersome software. You can see how easy the app is, right? So it's very easy for you to just say, okay, you want to track your soil from us? What's your email address? I'll send you a haul, then you can track it. It's literally as simple as that. So cool. There's another hand raised
Yeah,
here.
I think PS Pool, you have your hand raised.
Yes. Brian, you mentioned earlier about snow dumps. So
Yeah.
I'm with the municipality, and our contractors would dump snow on our city-owned property. Just wondering what it would look like using this app, if applicable. Like, what does that look like for us?
Yeah.
As
So
far as
in the
as far as tracking loads, and because
Yep.
sometimes drivers go missing.
Yeah,
And that sort of
understatement.
thing.
Yes, for sure. So here's one, right? So here's a snow dump in Markham created by Rice. So verified company. If you can do the same, right? You can literally press add a listing. You can say I want to create an import listing. Put your exact location of where this dump is. And then you would just set your material here to snow. And obviously it grades out, there are no real grades for snow or anything here, but you fill it out just like anything else. And then it will pop up on the map. And then from the other person's perspective, they will see this listing here. So this is now, your snow dump that you created, and I have to make an offer on the snow dump. So I would say, okay, I'm going to send it to, from my site. I'll make a listing, or share my details with you, and then you can create a haul from those two listings. Once you've matched, it really is one click to create a haul. So under tracking, you would say create a haul, and then you would just click on the site that you just created in the map. So very, very simple and straightforward.
So if the dump site is our own property,
Yep.
would it be beneficial to us as far as tracking loads going back and forth and that sort of thing, or is that?
I think so. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
it's overkill for snow just to make, versus contaminated soil. But I mean, why not have the paper records, right? Or sorry, the digital records instead of paper. So I think
yeah.
probably a great use case for sure.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, you're welcome.
Brian, we had a couple of questions, just location.
Cool.
So do you have a lot of fill users in Southwestern Ontario? And then how is this for Northeastern Ontario?
Yeah. So it depends how north and how southwest, but when you visit the app, you can kind of see for yourself here. Obviously, as it loads, here we go. So we have a pretty good spread of Ontario at the moment. And just because you don't see pins in your area doesn't mean that there aren't tons of people who are zooming around and looking for pins, right? This is a big challenge for us is people come to the site and then they zoom into, Elliott Lake, Ontario, and they're like, there's nobody here, right? And it's like, well, if you make a pin, then people will see it, right? So it's kind of like, if you're on Facebook Marketplace and it's like most people don't create wanted ads, they just create selling ads. If you create both and it will work. But all that to say, yeah, you can zoom around, you can see Ottawa, tons of listings. There's loads. We're creeping up now to Huntsville. There's lots of listings, in cottage country. But more north of that, they're starting to happen as well. You can see them popping up as well, Temiskaming, even Kirkland Lake. So there are users that are up there, and if you're in a more northerly, I don't know how north you're talking about, whether it's real north Ontario, not so much. Compliance is an enormous issue this north of Ontario. This is like a total free for all as far as we can tell. So and then as you zoom out, Alberta is starting to light up as well. So if you really zoom out, you can see Ontario lit up like a Christmas tree. Alberta's starting. But yeah, if you want to see your region, just visit the website and zoom in and create your listing and see what happens for sure.
Perfect.
Is there a feature that notifies the truck driver? Yes. So if you're the truck driver and you're being sent as a truck, you enter or you would have your cell phone number entered as part of your truck driver profile. It's one of the only things we ask for is the driver's cell phone number. And then they get a text message that says, here is your digital bill of lading. So if there's a bylaw enforcement, if there's like an officer that's checking trucks, press this link in your text messages, and then it loads your digital bill of lading so that you are in compliance. That is an optional field by popular demand, but there's a giant warning label that says if you don't put in the truck's driver's cell phone number, then they will be unable to be in compliance. So this is kind of the line that we have to straddle here is nobody wants to put their cell phone numbers into the app, but we want them to be in compliance. So we have to let them do both and just have big warning messages when they have strayed away from compliance. So yeah, but that's how it's done. Map oriented. Oh, you mean like in it's like a yeah, you can just right click and drag. So we have like a 3/4 inch view. So if you're on the map and you just right click, you can get as crazy as you want here. There you go. You don't like our cool 3/4 view? Come on, iHaul. Cool.
Reema, maybe hop over a question for you. And I do want to thank, I know Chris and Sanjay were in the chat answering questions. There was one question that got answered was road ditching, maintaining ditches is a form of infrastructure maintenance. But one question there that wasn't answered was, does the ministry have officers that show up on site to do any type of inspections? So I don't know, Chris or Reema or Sanjay, one of you want to.
For sure they do. Don't roll the dice. Register your sites, track your soil. Do not be compliant.
Yeah, just at that, we do have compliance officers who are assessing compliance with the requirements under the regulation. So that will certainly be happening at all kinds of sites. We don't have our compliance folks on the line here, obviously, to speak more to that. But yeah, the ministry does have officers to do compliance inspections. Yeah.
We hear the stories like it's not worth the work stoppage. It's not worth $100,000 to not register your site. Like everybody register your sites.
You have your hand up raised again. You can feel free to unmute there.
Sorry, it's Paul. So, Reema, that was my question about the enforcement officers. So, would it vary on the size of project if they were to show up on site, what they're inspecting? Like, for instance, so we do quite a bit of ditching in the municipality of Hamilton here, or city of Hamilton. Would they ever show up on site to do an inspection on city workers doing roadside ditching?
The way compliance inspections might be carried out could depend on the area of the province and just the amount of activity for a specific for excess soil management in that area. And there's a compliance policy the ministry follows, which seeks to assess compliance with projects, with transportation, with reuse, with interim sites, and it depends. There's a few factors being balanced out in terms of the risk level, concerns with human health and environmental impacts that a project may be having. So it depends. I don't think I have a clear answer for you there, but there's some risk assessment happening at each local office in terms of how they're approaching compliance with the various environmental issues that we might see.
Okay, and you may or may not be able to answer this question. So what if, like, say for instance, a private contractor who is excavating a pool, would an officer show up on site and check the paperwork and what kind of material they're pulling out of the ground and that sort of thing?
Yeah, Chris, I think I heard you come offline. Maybe I'll let you speak to.
Yeah, no, your answer was absolutely right. We do have a risk kind of based approach, and obviously something like a residential pool is probably at the lower end of the risk, but that doesn't mean that it would never be subject to something. And I was actually going to emphasize that one of the ways some of these lower risk sites become, part of a compliance effort sometimes is that there will be some other site, say a receiving site that there's been complaints about, and then from there they'll start to follow back. Where did that come from? And somebody says, oh, we got half of the soil from the ditching activities from Hamilton. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe we'll go check that out. So even though the direct activity itself may be normally seen as lower risk, sometimes we'll track back to that site. So we certainly can't say never to anything.
No. Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? I'm not.
Lane, I just answered yours. So yes, it is 3 active sites for free. So you could close one and open another for sure. And the marketplace is public. That's sort of the beauty of it, is that it's maximum sunlight. Everyone can see each other's sites. You can't see people's names or exact locations like I showed, but that is public. And then load tracking, though, is totally private. So nobody is seeing how much you're moving or where it's going to and from.
Perfect. So I do want to thank Reema and Chris and Sanjay from the ministry for joining us, as well as Bryan from the Phil app. And again, thank you, Bryan, for sponsoring this webinar. As I said, again, it's recorded. We will post the recording as well as share slide decks and resources and information for all of you either later this afternoon or tomorrow. You'll see it in your inboxes. Again, thank you for joining us. At AORS, we do want to put on more of these webinars that are relevant to you. So if you have ideas for webinars, please feel free to reach out to us. And I just hope you enjoy the rest of your day. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kelly.
Great. Thank you.
See you all.